Where will Brandon Aiyuk land? And what will the San Francisco 49ers get in exchange for the superstar wide receiver? What's going on, football fans? It's Mitch here, back with another BR live stream. And in this live stream, we're about to break down some potential destinations and trade packages for Brandon Aiyuk, one of the best, most well-rounded wide receivers in the NFL, young, ascending. He would make any football team better. Now, I just saw, literally before going on air, which is why we started a little bit later, I just saw a report from Rob Reinhart that suggests that the Pittsburgh Steelers are finalizing a trade deal with the 49ers for Brandon Aiyuk. The deal is worth upwards of $26.2 million a year for 4 years, and the final trade pieces are being put together. But Aiyuk to the Steel City is confirmed. Now, that is according to Rob Reinhart, okay? He's not a big source, so I'm not going to say that that's confirmed until we hear it from one of the bigger sources. But I just wanted to bring that up right at the start of the video, just in case something happens right now that, maybe he actually does get traded while I'm live on Bleacher Report. So, just wanted to bring that up. So if you guys want to look for yourselves, it's out there on Twitter. Rob Reinhart put out a suggestion that Brandon Aiyuk could be traded to the Steelers right now. And they already have their contract in place. They're working out the trade pieces. That could also just mean what we already know, which is that the Steelers and Aiyuk have mutual interest, but the 49ers can't find the right trade to actually allow this thing to happen. Because at the end of the day, the 49ers have the say. The 49ers can decide whether or not that trade package is acceptable or not. They have deemed the Cleveland Browns trade acceptable. They deemed the Patriots trade package acceptable. But when it came to Brandon Aiyuk, he didn't want to play for the Patriots, so they bowed out. They're done. They're no longer in the mix. And when it comes to the Browns, it really doesn't feel like Brandon Aiyuk wants to go to the Browns either, which would mean that, yeah, the Browns can offer him all this money. The Browns could put together this trade package. But at the end of the day, if he doesn't want to play there, the 49ers have no choice but to play ball with the team that he actually wants to play for, which seemingly is the Steelers. But if the Steelers don't come up with an acceptable offer, the 49ers can just continue to say up that offer or, bring us something of substance, right? Or eventually, Aiyuk might just have to come back home to the 49ers, right? So let's talk about it, guys. Let's talk about the trade packages and the teams. So the three teams that we wanted to discuss today: the Washington Commanders, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Cleveland Browns. These are the three teams that are heavily rumored around Brandon Aiyuk. Now, from what I understand, the Patriots, along with the Commanders, have bowed out of negotiation with the 49ers. The Commanders have reportedly removed themselves from any trade talks with Aiyuk, but I still will leave the door open there. The Patriots seem pretty realistically out of the window because the Patriots offered Aiyuk the most money of any of these teams. So if you're getting offered $30+ million and you're still not wanting to go to the team, you're definitely out of the discussions, right? So just from a contract standpoint, Brandon Aiyuk is going to be getting around $30 million a year. He was getting north of $30 million a year with the New England Patriots, but he did not want to go there. So the contract for any of these teams that makes the most sense is Amon-Ra St. Brown's 4-year, $120 million contract. So if you're one of those teams, you're going to have to pay a pretty penny for one of the young elite playmakers at the wide receiver position. It's going to be around $30 million a year over a 4-year contract, similar to Amon-Ra St. Brown, who got 4 years, $120 million. Okay, so let's begin with the Washington Commanders and trade packages that would make sense. So the first, I believe that would make sense to me, because the 49ers have to be enticed. Remember, from the 49ers' vantage point, from their view, they want to compete right now. They want to win a Super Bowl right now. So what would it do the 49ers to just get draft picks out of this whole thing, right? Like, why wouldn't they have traded him back when they could have traded him at the draft, right? But now they could get more capital. That is definitely possible because the draft is so far away. They could definitely get more capital, but they would have to wait. Now, the thing with the 49ers is they could turn that draft capital. Let's say they trade him to the Steelers. They could turn that second or third round pick, flip it to another receiver, or flip it to a defensive end, or flip it into something else, a tackle, that would help their chances of winning a Super Bowl. It doesn't have to be specifically the team that they trade Aiyuk to give them a wide receiver back, or to give them a or right tackle, or to give them a edge rusher, right? Those are the things that people believed that they're interested in, right? When it comes to Washington, people believe that they would need to get Jahan Dotson or Terry McLaurin back. Now, to me, it would be fair, and I think the Niners would take it if it was Terry McLaurin and a 2025 second-round pick. But I don't think the Commanders are willing to deal Terry McLaurin. But would they be willing to deal Jahan Dotson, who is a former first-round pick, not of this regime, has not lived up to expectations, but he's appealing enough for the Niners to take him on and to maybe utilize him in their future plans. Plus, he's cheap, and they can potentially work out a cheap deal for him, right? Now, the crossover there to me is Jahan Dotson is most effective as a slot receiver, in which largely Deebo Samuel and Ricky Pearsall project to play those positions. Largely. Not 100%, but largely, right? Terry McLaurin, Amari Cooper, these guys that have been rumored in trades for the 49ers in return for Brandon Aiyuk have translatable skills that Aiyuk also possesses to play the X receiver or to play out wide a majority of the snaps, to release off the line of scrimmage, beat press coverage, win against man-to-man. That's the skill set that Aiyuk brings the 49ers. So when thinking about getting a receiver in return for Aiyuk, you need to think of somebody that's somewhat similar to Aiyuk. He's probably older. He's probably not as explosive. He's probably not as good with the ball in his hands. But he's got some skills like route running chops, out wide, the ability to beat man. Because when you think of the 49ers offense, Deebo Samuel's the yak threat. George Kittle's the do-it-all tight end, can create a big play, can really go after the catch as well. McCaffrey, obviously the superstar running back that can run routes. He is a man beater as well. But when you're talking about Deebo Samuel, he's not much of a man beater. He's never really been known as a guy that just routes people up and creates a massive amount of separation. Aiyuk's the guy that anytime they face man coverage, they're gonna have to go to him in his matchup, or potentially George Kittle or Christian McCaffrey, right? So if Aiyuk is removed from that situation, they're going to have to be relying on a rookie and Ricky Pearsall to step up in a major way. And for a team that's in a Super Bowl window, it wouldn't make sense for them to do that. So bringing in somebody like Amari Cooper or Terry McLaurin would make a lot more sense because those players play a similar role to Brandon Aiyuk. Now, like I said with the Commanders, if the Commanders are still in this thing, it's going to probably have to take a receiver, one of their top two receivers, and a second-round pick in 2025. But the Commanders reportedly have removed themselves. So to the next team, we've got the Cleveland Browns. Now, the Cleveland Browns have reportedly worked out a framework for a trade, and the 49ers have accepted that framework of a trade. I don't know what it is. Nobody knows what it is. Maybe a couple people. But what I would suggest that it is, and with Cleveland, I think it makes a lot of sense for the 49ers as a team, because the Cleveland Browns have a lot of different depth players that if the 49ers want to improve subtly at certain positions, they could maybe get a couple players out of this trade. Like the 49ers' major weaknesses on their roster are their offensive line and arguably maybe their corner position. And obviously they would maybe want a receiver for Aiyuk, right? So let's say the Browns have all of this depth. They have, let's say Elijah Moore at receiver. They obviously have Amari Cooper if somehow the Browns would allow him to be traded. They have multiple tackles that are starting quality that don't even really play. So you're talking about James Hudson, DeJuan Jones, guys that played a lot of snaps last year that maybe could be traded in this deal. A corner like Greg Newsome, considering that Denzel Ward makes a ton of money. Martin Emerson had a huge year last year. The Browns are stacked at cornerback, so they could maybe move off of Greg Newsome. Now, the thing is, which was brought up in the chat here by Jenner, is Cleveland does not have a lot of money. They don't have a lot of cap. So they would have to move on from a substantial contract, which is what leads you to believe that Amari Cooper would be in the trade, because Amari Cooper does make substantial money. So that would actually allow them to throw, Amari Cooper into that deal. And if you're the 49ers, I think you would argue, at least I would, that Aiyuk is better than Cooper. He's obviously younger than Cooper, but not by a lot. He's not a lot better right now. Cooper's a very good player, and they play similar roles. So you could easily see Cooper replacing Aiyuk in San Francisco. You get an extra pick for the future, use that down the road on your offensive line or your defensive line or whatever. And that would make a lot of sense. It would also make sense for Cleveland building, a young offense around Deshaun Watson. A long-term wide receiver one. The Browns have been all about, really going after wide receivers. They signed and traded for Jerry Jeudy, right? They've got David Njoku at tight end. They're trying to put young pieces and superstar pieces around Deshaun Watson. So it would make sense. It's just that in order to work the cap and have an acceptable trade with the 49ers, it would have to be like a second-round pick in Amari Cooper, or it would have to be multiple players like Elijah Moore and let's say James Hudson or DeJuan Jones for Brandon Aiyuk with the draft pick. So if it's not Amari Cooper, it would have to be multiple players. But then at the same time, in order for the cap to work, the 49ers would probably have to accept some of that cap back, at least early in the contract. They would have to take on some of that money. So that's where it gets a little tricky. I think with Amari Cooper, it feels a little bit easier for that to work out. So, yeah. Again, guys, I did see, before we get to our next team, a report about the Pittsburgh Steelers. So just to reiterate that, Rob Reinhardt on Twitter, or X, said that the Pittsburgh Steelers are finalizing a trade deal with the 49ers for Aiyuk. Upwards of $26.2 million, although that seems cheap. I cannot confirm this source, but that's what I've seen. I mean, I don't really know him that well. Final trade pieces are being put together, but Aiyuk to the Steel City is confirmed, is what he said. So when we talk about the Steelers, the interesting thing about the Steelers for me, and the hang up with the Steelers, is like, what do they offer the 49ers in exchange for Brandon Aiyuk? And to me, I think the only thing that would really work is draft picks. Like, I don't see a clear identifiable player that the 49ers could get from the Steelers for Aiyuk. They're not going to trade George Pickens. The Niners don't need a running back. So they're not in the business of, trading for Najee Harris, for example, if they want to, or Jalen Warren, let's say, because that's a surplus position for the Steelers. edge rusher, like would they trade like Herbig? Because they already signed Alex Highsmith. TJ Watt's not going anywhere. Cameron Hayward's too much of a team legend to trade him. The corner position isn't exactly the greatest on the Steelers. They're not trading Minkah Fitzpatrick. The linebackers on the Steelers, although they do have a surplus at that position, none of them really fit the scheme of the 49ers, so I don't think it would really work. I just look at the roster of the Steelers, and I say, like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me from a player standpoint, because all these other trades, the Patriots, were reportedly offering like Kendrick Bourne and maybe Matt Judon and a draft pick, right? That would make sense. The Steelers, like Calvin Austin, brought up by DeMar here. Calvin Austin, like, he's barely done anything in the NFL. Would he even make the 49ers top 4 wide receivers on their depth chart? Like, unlikely. Honestly, unlikely. I like him. Unlikely, though. Daniels, you brought up Daniels. He's too good of a player. I don't think the Steelers would let go of James Daniels. I mean, maybe. I don't understand why they would, though. If you guys can clarify why they would. He's a good player. He's a good guard. I don't understand with the way that the Steelers have built up their offensive line why they would do that. But obviously that would make sense for the 49ers to maybe just subtly upgrade their guard position. Like the Steelers don't really have a tackle to offer because their tackles are both first-round picks. So they're not going to, like, the depth isn't really, it's a marginal upgrade, if anything, for the 49ers. So for me, like, the only guy really would be like Herbig, and then maybe like a second and a third round pick. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Second and a third round pick. Maybe they throw in some sort of player there at like a Herbig at edge rusher. But that is where the Niners, I think, would turn that second or third round pick into a trade down the road. Like, I don't know, who would be an example of a receiver midway through the year, their team's struggling, we're going to offer you a third round pick for this player. One actually does come to mind. His name is Davante Adams. If Davante Adams is not very happy in Las Vegas and he wants to go somewhere where he can win a championship during the middle of the year, we saw him on the receiver documentary. He was not having fun in Vegas last year. He only has so many years left. So maybe around week 6 or 7, if the Raiders, let's say, are 2-4, they could offer a third round pick for Davante Adams and bring him to San Francisco. That would make sense. That would make sense to me. Another guy, during the middle of the year that they could flip for, because I feel like the Niners, they're not going to just try and waste this season. They understand that Brandon Aiyuk is an essential part of last year's NFC representative team, NFC championship team. If Ricky Pearsall is not an absolute stud right away, they're going to have to make a move at receiver, offensive line, defensive line, somewhere to offset that loss, right? Their defense is rather going to have to be that good, or their offense is going to have to be better on the offensive line or whatever, right? Now, Davante would go for a third. And the reason that is, he's old. He makes a lot of money. And he's got like 1 year left on his contract. So yes, he would be traded for like a third round pick. He's not as valuable, in my opinion, as Brandon Aiyuk, because he's way older. And now that wouldn't even be the trade. That's the one team I don't understand why they're not in this negotiation. Like Antonio Pierce, Brandon Aiyuk, I think there's some crossover there at ASU. But anyways, I just feel like that's the one name that came to mind in the middle of the year that could happen. Because, I mean, Aiyuk was better than Adams last year as a player. And also, he's way younger. And Adams is older, and Adams has no attachment to the Raiders after next year. So, like, he's probably not going to want to stay on the Raiders. He's probably going to want to go to the Jets with Aaron Rodgers, right? Or he's probably going to want to go somewhere else where he can win a championship. The Chiefs, the Bills, right? A team that's willing to pay him decent, but that's just my thought. But anyways, when it comes to the Steelers, I kind of think it's a second and a third round pick from Pittsburgh, along with maybe another player, like a small addition like Herbig, maybe a Calvin Austin, or James Daniels was a good thought by the chat, or maybe a 2026 draft pick, like another third round pick or something like that. So that's basically, it for me in terms of the trade packages. Just to reiterate, the Commanders, I do think are already ruling themselves out. But if this was to happen, I feel like it would be a second round pick and rather Terry McLaurin or Jahan Dotson. If it was Jahan Dotson, I feel like second round pick, Jahan Dotson, that would make sense to me. Terry McLaurin in a second might be a little bit too much. And that's probably why the Commanders don't want to do it. And that's probably what the Niners are asking for, to be fair. The Pittsburgh Steelers, a second, a third, and maybe a player. The Browns, Amari Cooper, and a second. Given Cooper's age and contract, it would make sense for Brandon Aiyuk. If not Amari Cooper, a second round pick and multiple players like Elijah Moore and maybe Greg Newsome, DeJuan Jones, James Hudson, one of those additions into the trade. But it does feel like a second round pick is likely. Maybe like a second and a third is likely. And then from there, if he's going to end up in Pittsburgh, I feel like it's going to be a draft pick trade where the 49ers use those draft picks in the middle of the season to upgrade their team at the trade deadline, whether it be on the offensive line, at wide receiver, or on defense. That's my thought. Now, in terms of Steelers fans out there and anybody that's interested in Brandon Aiyuk, okay? I just want to say a few things. I think that people misunderstand how good Brandon Aiyuk is. Just for reference, I ranked Brandon Aiyuk as the 6th best receiver in the NFL. Now, you could take that for what it's worth. You may agree, you may disagree. Brandon Aiyuk is an elite player. He can literally do anything. He can play inside, outside. He's a great route runner. His releases are some of the best in football. He can win downfield. He's got very good speed. He's excellent after the catch. He fits in any offense. He really doesn't have any limitations. The only small thing I would say about his game that he's not the best at is like contested catch scenarios. He's certainly not Mike Evans in that regard. But you look at what he did last year. 75 catches, 1,342 yards, 17.9 yards per reception, and 7 touchdowns. That was one of the most productive players in the NFL at his position, in a second-team All-Pro. And, one of the most big play receivers, one of the most efficient receivers in the NFL at a 71.4 catch percentage, considering he's gaining 18 yards per catch. That's insane. Even when you dive into the deeper analytics on Brandon Aiyuk, you look at things like, the yards per route run, where he's elite. You look at things like PFF. He was the second graded receiver in the NFL last year, according to PFF, only behind the best player in the NFL, according to the NFL Top 100, Tyreek Hill. He was only number 2 to Tyreek Hill. So he was that good last year. So I think people don't understand how good Brandon Aiyuk is. Again, he can give you yards after catch. He can give you big plays. He gives you the most valuable role in the NFL at wide receiver. He can play on the outside. He can beat press coverage. He can beat man coverage, right? His yards per route run was over 3 yards per route run, which was 4th in the NFL. And that was during the regular season last year. Yeah, really good player. Really good player. He was the number 1 receiver last year on his team. Because the difference is Aiyuk plays against the best perimeter corners in the league. And Debo is the move player. Debo he moves around. He's in the backfield. He's in the slot. He's out wide. He does a lot, but he's not usually being covered by the best corner on the other team. Brandon Aiyuk was the number one receiver when you consider X receiver playing outside the formation. He also was the most productive player on the team last year over George Kittle, over Deebo Samuel at receiver. He's the number one receiver. He was the number one receiver. If he gets removed, he's no longer obviously the number one receiver. But anyone that watched the Niners last year knows that Aiyuk was the best receiver on that team. He's the one that consistently is beating coverage. He's the one that's consistently taking on the most difficult role in the offense. The other guys are aided by the scheme more so than Aiyuk, in my opinion. Now, obviously, McCaffrey's the best player in this offense. He's the most important player in the offense. And when Debo is on, he's different. But in terms of, like, again, what does the scheme do for you the least? I think it would be Aiyuk. The offense, see, that's a different discussion. The offense runs through McCaffrey. The offense does not run through Aiyuk because he plays outside, but he's also still the number one receiver. He doesn't get double covered a lot, no, but a lot of receivers don't, unless they obviously are the number one target and there's no one else on their team that's worth anything. Yeah, MJD, I disagree with you as well. Having watched the Niners play every game for the last couple of years, Aiyuk was the number one receiver on the team. Debo was hurt part of the season. Like, not the number one player. Again, that's McCaffrey. Fanatic says, I thought the Commanders were out of the mix. I guess this guy has new intel. I thought so too. They wanted me to talk about him. So I just talk about what they wanted me to talk about. So the Commanders were one of the teams they listed that they wanted me to discuss a potential trade package. That is Bleacher Report I'm referring to. So I do my job. I give you the trade package. But I also brought up multiple times that I thought they were already out of the discussion. But if they're back in, you never know. They could always re-enter. This is Peters, a guy that's heavily connected to John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. They could easily re-enter the discussion if, things kind of dwindle between them and the Steelers. From 1 to 10, how likely is it that he's going to be a Steeler? I would say probably like 7.5, 8 at this point. It really feels very likely. I don't want to say like 9 or 10 because that's like outrageous. Like, you're not going to say that ever. No problem, Fanatics. MJD, if you'd like to show me the numbers that suggest that Debo is the number one receiver, if you'd like to show me, well, I don't know what you could show me from last year that would tell me that Debo is the number one receiver when Debo largely plays in the slot. It doesn't necessarily mean that Debo is not more valuable than Aiyuk. That's not exactly what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that I think the more difficult role to play in the offense is Brandon Aiyuk's role. I think. Because I don't think there's many players in the Niners. He's more of a downfield threat. He has to consistently beat press coverage more often. Debo gets more help from Kyle's offense, in my opinion, from what I watch, than Aiyuk. That's what I'm saying. Do I think he's going to be traded, or will the Niners figure it out? I think he rather gets traded. Like, honestly, I think he rather gets traded to the Steelers or he comes back to San Francisco. That's kind of what I think at this point. That's my sense. That's not a report. That's not insider knowledge. All that is my hunch of reading all this stuff. Is that if he doesn't get traded to the Steelers, it doesn't appear that he wants to go to Cleveland, which is the team that would make the most sense for 49ers to make a trade with. As I brought up, they have a lot of players that could actually be traded to San Francisco and help them, right? Tackles, corners, receivers, and draft picks. He doesn't want to go to New England, and Washington doesn't seem like they're willing to match that offer. So, in my opinion, it's Pittsburgh or San Francisco. That's what I think. If he doesn't go to Pittsburgh, he's going to come back home and they're going to figure something out for the season. And then maybe down the road, he leaves next year, free agency or something. Because if you're Aiyuk, think about it. Honestly, like even, and this is no offense to the Steelers fans, why would you want to go to Pittsburgh if you're Brandon Aiyuk? Honestly, other than Mike Tomlin, why would you want to go to Pittsburgh? They don't have a quarterback after next year. Justin Fields and Russell Wilson are free agents, and they're both not the greatest, especially Russ at this point in his career, and Fields is not known for his Peyton Manning-like accuracy, right? They already have George Pickens, who in his own right is a little bit of a diva, but also like a commanding wide receiver that wants the ball. They have Arthur Smith, who previously with Atlanta, run heavy team. It's going to be a run heavy team in Pittsburgh. They've put a lot of resources into their offensive line. They're going to be a play action oriented team. Aiyuk is not going to see any more stats, any more catches, any more targets than he did in San Francisco, in Pittsburgh. If he went somewhere else, like let's say maybe Cleveland, where he was truly the number one target and like had very little competition, his only competition really being David Njoku and Jerry Jeudy, then that would make more sense. If you were to go to New England, where they have a young, promising quarterback, Drake May, and he would make $30+ million instead of 27, that would make more sense. To me, like, Pittsburgh doesn't make a lot of sense for Aiyuk individually speaking, outside of just the allure of Mike Tomlin as a great coach. Outside of that, the long-term quarterback situation is weird. Wide receiver situation and production there is murky. Like, to me, I don't know. I don't get it. I really don't get it, to me. But it is what it is. If he wants to do that, he can do that. I just think he might regret it because there's not many better places than San Francisco. If I was a receiver, I'd probably take less money to stay in San Francisco than play for Pittsburgh. But that's just me. I don't know. Washington would also make sense, especially if they ended up trading McLaurin in the deal, because it does feel like Washington, they have a young quarterback. They've got a best friend there in Jaden Daniels. They've got, right, like a really pass-heavy offensive coordinator in Cliff Kingsbury. So at least you'll get a lot of stats and probably a lot of money. So press G-Men fan, the suggestion is a second and a third round pick, maybe a future 2026 mid-round selection as well, like a third, let's say. So a second, third, and third, or like a second, third, and a depth player like Herbig or Calvin Austin or something like that. That would be my trade package for Brandon Aiyuk with the Steelers. It's just difficult with the Steelers in terms of win now players that they can give the Niners. There's just not a lot unless they trade Pickens, which I don't think is going to happen. So My take on Cleveland and Washington couldn't be further from the truth. Can you explain? Also, I'm not 16. I'm also not paid for intel. I'm paid for my opinion. So James Daniels fits perfect last year of deal similar number and fits San Francisco position of need. Yeah, James Daniels would make sense. I just never thought that Steelers would be willing to trade him. Maybe I'm wrong. Honestly, I don't really understand that. I kind of feel like the Steelers' strength is their offensive line and their defensive line. So I don't really know. I'm just going to look at the Steelers depth chart. So let's say they have Zach Frazier at center now. They drafted him. Troy Fontenot at right tackle, supposedly. Fontenot could play guard, and they could put Dan Moore at tackle. They could have Mason McCormick if they think he's good enough to play guard, but that would be a little suspect. And Nate Herbig is also backup center. See, I don't love that depth overall, unless McCormick is a stud, which who knows? Yeah, I mean, James Daniels would be a great pickup for the Niners. I think James Daniels is a very good player. James Daniels has been good for 7-8 years at this point. The other one is Nick Herbig. I'm not sure if I've been calling him Nate the whole time. Nick Herbig is a really, really upside pass rusher. He's the third edge rusher on the Steelers. But the thing with the Steelers is they have Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt, and they're both signed long-term. And then, Marcus Golden, they signed him coming off the bench. So it's not like they would really be missing a third edge rusher. I never said Fontenot or Frazier were going to the Niners. I brought them up on their depth chart as players that are on their team. And they're not getting traded. Dan Moore isn't very good. I would not trade for him if I was the Niners. He probably wouldn't even start on the Niners. Not the Niners, the thing with them is, though, with the offensive line guys, is they have the same offensive line as last year. They didn't lose anything. They only added pieces. They added Chris Hubbard, a veteran from the Titans. They added a third-round pick, Dominic Pooney. He's also pretty interesting, so he could start. Spencer Burford is still there for depth. But overall, the same O-line exists for the Niners. It's Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, John Feliciano, Colton McKivitz, who McKivitz isn't bad. McKivitz, he's not great, but he's not bad. And he's entering year 2 as a starter, so he could actually be better. So all I'm saying there is with the O-line, I don't know if the Niners are in as bad shape on the O-line as people kind of think. They could definitely upgrade, but I don't know. Bourne Judon in a second rounder for Aiyuk. That was the reported trade with my Patriots, but the Aiyuk doesn't want to come here, which I don't really get, man. Honestly, I don't get it. I don't understand why you would want to go to the Steelers so much more than the Patriots. Other than Mike Tomlin, again, the Patriots, I think Drake May is going to be a stud. So maybe I'm wrong about that. But Drake May is very promising. And you're a young receiver. So it's not like you need to win in 2024. You're making $32 million, which $30+ million, because the Patriots reportedly offered Aiyuk the most money. You would be the best receiver on the team by a long shot, and you'd be the number 1 target, which is what you always wanted. And you'd be playing with a young quarterback that could be really, really, really good. So to me, I don't understand what's not kind of interesting about New England. It's an iconic franchise. They have a very good defense. You're not that far away. If you add Brandon Aiyuk, you need maybe a couple pieces on the O-line, and you'd be a pretty good team within pretty short order. So to me, I don't really understand why the Patriots are not at least in the discussion for Aiyuk, but maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's just the understanding of what that team was last year and how bad they were last year and not trusting a rookie quarterback. But That's just me. Mac Jones, to be fair, was the 15th pick and the 5th quarterback drafted, and Drake May was like the 3rd overall pick. And he's a lot more physically talented than Mac Jones. There's a lot more belief in Drake May across the NFL, draft scouts, and all that stuff. What about Calvin Austin and a 1st rounder? That could work. I think a 1st rounder would probably get it done, to be honest. Mav, that's debatable, first of all. But secondly, I would say that I never said the Steelers. See, you guys like take something I say and then you like say like I said it somehow. I don't understand you guys sometimes. I didn't say the Steelers are not iconic. I just said the Patriots are. I didn't use that as something to, against them. All right, guys, I think I'm going to end it here. Appreciate everybody tuning in. It was awesome. A lot of people. You guys let me know where you think Aiyuk is going to land. For me, if I had to make a prediction, Pittsburgh Steelers will have Brandon Aiyuk in short order. But I would also say that if the Steelers, that doesn't happen, I think he's coming back to San Francisco. And that might be a little bold, but that's me. So that's my prediction. It's been Mitch. Follow me here on the BR app for more live streams. Whether you love me or you hate me and you just want to comment and have some opinions, I'll be here. Next week, I know for sure I'm doing more NFL power rankings. I'm here weekly throughout the season. I'm going to be here multiple times a week talking about the NFL. So excited for that. And you can also find me on YouTube, The Bottom Line View. I cover all 32 NFL teams. So I wanted to, what's funny about that? I was just going to post my receiving core rankings, which had the 49ers at number 1, but I can't post it now. It's just sitting there in the studio because now Brandon Aiyuk might be traded. So I can't, I'd have to redo the whole video. So anyways, thanks guys for watching. We'll see you later. Peace.